Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from near and far, and welcome back for this week's DICE Data Center Deep Dive session. For today's discussion, we'll continue our construction, design, and development mini-series as we explore offsite construction and the differences in manufacturing, construction, and delivery efficiency. I'd like to give a big shout out and thank you to all of today's speakers and our sponsors, Tyndall Corporation and Clayco. And a big shout out to Tim Gainey over at Tyndall Corporation for stepping up again as our lead sponsor. Thanks, Tim. Please also note the following housekeeping details for today's webinar. First, to all of our attendees, if you are not presenting today, you are both on mute and without video, so no need to be dressed up for the occasion. There will be plenty of time for questions following the session. Click the box that says Q&A and make sure you click Q&A and not chat for questions. We'll try to get to all of your questions, or as many as possible, and please note that only questions asked in the Q&A section will be answered because we'll likely miss them if they're asked in the chat section. Please feel free to use the chat section to connect with each other and network. Additionally, throughout the webinar, we'll be sending out polls, giving you, the audience, the chance to share your opinions and help us drive the conversation forward. And finally, don't worry about taking notes. This webinar will be recorded and sent to you after we conclude, so relax and enjoy the conversation. Now, today's session will feature a wealth of knowledge. Our speakers include Nancy Novak, Chief Innovation Officer from Compass Data Centers, Phil Lawson-Shanks, Chief Innovation Officer from Aligned Energy, Ryan McGuire, Executive VP and Shareholder for Clayco, Robbie Sovey, Executive VP of Development and Construction from T5 Data Centers, and will be moderated by Tim Gainey, Manager of Business Development for Commercial Applications from Tyndall Corporation. Now let's get started. Take it away, Tim. Oh, you're on mute, Tim.
How about now?
There you go.
All right. I want to thank everyone for joining the call and thank Adam and the BISNOW crew for securing such a star-studded experienced panel today and asking me to moderate. I want to start with I know Adam did a little brief introduction, but I want to add to that just a little bit, and we'll ask the other panelists to maybe do the same. Been with Tyndall for 23 years, 21 years actually in operations, so I actually know what we do. And Tyndall has been around since 1963 with 6 plants strategically located across the Mid-Atlantic, the South, and the Southeast. We serve from southern Pennsylvania and New Jersey all the way down the East Coast, Gulf Coast, and the entire state of Texas. So that's a little bit about me and Tyndall. Nancy, would you like to share a little bit about Compass and yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks, Tim. I am Nancy Novak, Chief Innovation Officer for Compass Data Centers. I spent my entire career as a general contractor, over 20 years for a national firm, and then another 5 years with a global firm as the national VP of operations. So I'm a builder, and I went to I always tease about, I went to the dark side. Now I'm a developer, and shareholder in Compass Data Centers. And I'm super, super excited to be on this panel because out of all of the crazy, diverse things I've built in my career, data centers are giving us a great opportunity to look at these repeatable model type facilities that are allowing us to improve and disrupt this business. And offsite manufacturing is, top of my list. So really happy to be here.
Thanks, Nancy. Ryan, would you like to share a bit?
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on what part of the country you're in. So Ryan McGuire, Executive VP and one of the partners at Clayco. Clayco is a $3.2 billion a year company, integrated design build firm. We also have real estate development subsidiaries that do concrete and curtain wall. We've got about 2,400 employees across the nation, offices across the nation as well, about 240 architects within the firm, and we're a top 10 data center builder. We also do a lot of other markets like corporate office, where we're a top 4 builder and top 2 builder of industrial high-scale manufacturing facilities as well. Our mission critical group focuses on Fortune 500 companies. We're working with the big tech firms, certainly universities, some of the enterprise clients as well.
Thank you, Ryan. Phil?
Thank you. Phil Lawson-Shanks, Chief Innovation Officer of Aligned Energy. I joined Aligned almost 2 years ago, primarily because of what they're doing and how they're doing it. Looking at the market today, data centers are really the lifeblood of this new industrial revolution. Yeah, we have the internet. We've done all the things to change that, to make it work better over the last few years. Now, as it's growing, all the platforms that we use on a daily basis live somewhere, and they have to live in a data center. So there's many, many more of them all across the world, across new regions, existing regions, and the amount of power that they utilize. It's predicted that in the next few years, by 2025, they will consume as much power as the whole of India as a continent. So it drew me here because of the way Aligned addressed this market. Their vision and practice is to be the most sustainable data center business on the planet. And the technologies we have, the way we build and design and operate, certainly meet all those criteria. And that's so important now for the sophisticated buyers, be they enterprise or cloud providers. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for having me speak.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate that. Robbie? Can you hear me, Robbie? You're on, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so I'm Executive Vice President, D5 Data Centers, responsible for our construction services group and the development domestically and internationally, delivering the assets. We build, own, and operate data centers across the U.S. and then select international markets. And I am just happy to be on this panel with you again, Tim, and the rest of the team.
Thank you, Robbie. All right, well, to get started, I've heard it said that a well-defined question is half answered. So let's start off with why offsite construction is so important. And to start our conversation off, I'd ask Nancy to begin.
Yeah, so thank you, Tim. So I taught, everyone knows in construction, traditionally, there's the big four. The big four are cost, schedule, quality, and safety. And those are the things we usually grade ourselves on in the construction industry. What I add to that, both diversity and sustainability, because I think those are two equally as critical, if not more critical than the other four. And I also believe that those two things will drive better results when it comes to schedule and safety and quality and cost. So anyway, offsite manufacturing is the tip of the spear on how we can disrupt our business to become more inclusive and to become more productive, which we desperately need.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nancy. And I know one of the items that you hear quite often that drive offsite construction also is lack of skilled labor. And I believe we were discussing how diversity can help with that. And one of the programs that Tyndall has started, we focus very much on going to high schools, even junior high schools, middle schools, trying to inform them of the option of going to skill, become a tradesman instead of going to college per se. And what that has done, that has actually enticed many women to come to work in our facility instead of, because one of the drawbacks where they didn't necessarily want to travel, that gives them the opportunity to go to a plant like we have across the country so that they know when they're coming to work and maybe not know exactly when they're coming off, but they don't have to travel an hour or so afterwards or live in a hotel. They can stay at home. So that number-wise, it's still very low compared to men, but the percentage has spiked. It's helped a lot.
And Tim, just to jump in on that conversation too, certainly here in Chicago, we've got a big labor workforce gap, as Nancy mentioned, in terms of some of the benefits of doing offsite manufacturing. Between the last Great Recession to about the 10 years after the last Great Recession, the Chicago workforce has actually dropped down 17%. And so we have a need of 13,000 additional trade workers and trade partners by the year 2024. Now, also in Chicago, you mentioned diversity. Black males in Chicago between the age of 20 and 24 only have a 47% employment rate in the city. We're obviously among some of the most diverse cities in the nation, but that's one of the worst employment rates for Black males in the country. So I think there is a lot of opportunity with offsite manufacturing to get more interest in the construction business and really start to target some key demographics that are really underrepresented within our industry.
Thanks, Ryan. Anything to add on that, Phil, Robbie?
All I'd say about the offsite, we use offsite manufacturing. We containerize all our equipment offsite. We have our manufacturers do that for us. So we're bringing those jobs to those trades where they are. We actually have 50 megawatts of capacity stored at our supply chain manufacturers. So we can drop those in at any given time. Now, to do that, obviously you have to have standardization, which we've spent a lot of time doing. So it gives us the ability to be very flexible. As one job is speeding up or one is slowing, we can move those portions around and deliver those very, very quickly. Also, that gives us the ability to control the waste and all the debris that gets generated at a build site. There's so much metal and plastics and whatever. And with the best will in the world, you're not going to be able to sweep up all those little bits of copper and steel, and they can leach into the water table. So as we're building data centers where people haven't built data centers before, as the growth, as the cloud providers are pushing those out to new regions, it's really important to be good stewards of the location that you're building in. So we like the ability to build offsite and just to ship those in very much.
Yeah, I agree actually with the 4 points that Nancy hit as well. I mean, the cost, schedule, safety, and quality. Speed to market is everything in our business, especially when you're chasing the hyperscale community, as I know most everyone on this call understands and appreciates. But in addition, you know, those four main bullet points, the other thing that, and this may be Tim hit on a point a little bit later down the road, but you know, with these containerized solutions that everybody is deploying, it is, you know, it frees up substantial space inside the building and allows you to maximize your capacity and power offering. So, you know, I would say that's really the fifth bullet, and it may even be one of the most important bullets, is you could really maximize your building space and really just add additional capacity for the hyperscale community, because the capacity is everything right now.
Absolutely. Well, there's a poll question. Sorry, guys, can't see you. Nancy, anything, were you guys doing the standardized design as well to try to help out with working off site? And
absolutely. I mean, absolutely. We, you know, we're trying to ask the question in the beginning, what can't be done off site, because we want not just to do the power centers and the equipment, the MEP equipment, but also the internal stuff, you know, that anything we can do to componentize, you know, electrical rooms, you know, pop rooms, you know, you name it, bathrooms, kitchens, you know, wall units, you know, composite systems. We're trying to bring as much as we can off site for a bunch of reasons. Obviously there's the top four, like I mentioned, but in addition to that, it's speed to market. It's being able to buffer your schedule by deploying these things into these strategically located warehouses so that you can move things around. There's a kit of parts, you know, in our structures that go from, you know, small, medium to gigantic, that can be interchangeable. Finding the supply chain that can suit that, especially in your world, Tim, in the precast world, is challenging but not impossible. But to look at how to service each geography, and what we found is you get to do a lot more with less when it comes to the resources that you need on the job site. And we desperately need to do that in this day and age, because resources are very, very scarce. Even through COVID and the downturn in the market, especially in the data center construction industry, nothing has slowed down, and resources are still very scarce. And I look at it through the lenses of the tradesperson as well. I've traveled coast to coast and visited as many offsite plants as I can. Some it's their full livelihood of their business. Some it's pieces of their business, right? And I'm so encouraged when I see more diverse employees in these facilities. It allows you to put a daycare there. It allows you to do good training. It allows you to have a clean and controlled environment, which makes you more efficient. And by the way, you know, white men like this too. Nobody wants to commute 2 hours across town and have to come back. And then the most glaring thing for me is, when you're a tradesperson in our business, you're working yourself out of a job every time you're on a job and then waiting to be reassigned to another job. When you're in an offsite manufacturing environment, the jobs are coming to you. So the life balance is way, way better. And I'm hoping that's going to encourage us to be able to attract more talent.
Very good
And
point.
just jump in there as well. So when we talk about the offsite manufacturing, one of the key things that we found, let's take generators, for example. There's so many manufacturers that everybody uses, and the hyperscalers use a lot of them. So, and they're buying manufacturing cycles. They're not just buying by unit. They're actually buying, give me a month of your manufacturing cycle, and then the next one comes in. So there's a point where the manufacturer has to staff up to meet that demand. And then they put a lot of their staff on furlough while they just retool for the next one. What we've done is said, don't let them go on furlough. In that trough time, keep all your staff and just replenish our pool. So it's this enabling the manufacturers to keep more staff at work and bringing more revenue to those regions at all times. So we're looking at holistically, not only just environmental, but also from a societal perspective, and just enabling communities to grow faster.
Hey, Tim, let me jump in here. I'm looking at some of these questions, and one was the field costs, the cost for the field versus the modular factory. It's all about efficiency. And historically, when you're building a data center, you drop equipment on site, and 3 to 4 months later, you're fully commissioned through ISTs. Now you're able to drop a container on site that's fully cabled, and it's more of a termination effort. And 2 months later or less, you're fully commissioned through ISTs. If you work around the clock or work, 7/10s, you maybe a month away. And also in market dependent. Some markets are union, some markets aren't. Some markets have a lot more expensive labor pool. And then not to mention to Nancy's point, I think Phil's point, some markets it's very lean on the from a competency standpoint on the ability to provide the adequate crews to do things. So by doing it off-site, it really helps from an efficiency standpoint. You also have the same crews and production crews doing the same containers across, whether it's for T5 or whether it's just for Compass or Facebook, right? They're not changing that much. So there's a definite efficiency benefit to putting these things together in a factory and then deliver them to the site.
Yeah, and I agree with all those points that everyone made. I think to us, one of the biggest aspects or biggest values of offsite manufacturing is really de-risking the labor pool. We talked a little bit earlier about the labor constraints and the capacity, but we also have an aged workforce. There's more people retiring, getting out of the business than there are coming into the business. We all know that there's less people to replace those that have that skill and capability. And a lot of these projects, especially the hyperscale projects, are built in remote areas, very rural areas that don't have a large labor pool to pull from to begin with. So the majority of offsite, as much as you can do offsite and bring those on to the project, it helps mitigate those issues. I will say, I think there's a lot of exciting things happening out there. I think the data center market, though, has taken a little bit, I won't say longer because it's a newer industry. So designing a hyperscale data center is newer than designing a big mega hospital project. Some of the other construction verticals that have already gone through their learning cycle and their learning curve with respect to design, bringing in design partners with the contractors, with the MEP trade partners and others that can really help influence those designs. The more repeatable these designs become, the more able we are to prefabricate and do offsite manufacturing opportunities, the more standardized we start to make designs, both standardization for operations for the facility, but standardization in terms of layout and other attributes of the facility. Those all lend toward more opportunities to do offsite manufacturing. So there's some exciting things happening. We're working with clients that are making really large investments and looking at how to accomplish both those facts. But a lot of it does come back to how do we de-escalate that labor pool, just knowing what we face in the future in the industry, the available supply and demand of construction labor, skilled construction labor. Prefabrication is definitely a big solution to that.
Absolutely. Very good points. Want to bring two things together that Ryan, you brought up a point, and Nancy, you brought up a point. Ryan, you were talking about how the average age or the aging skilled labor pool. And Nancy, you had talked, well, also how COVID is affecting that. Because the older you are, it seems that the more you may be subject to potential problems with COVID, which may be accelerating some of the retirement that we're seeing, which just, to me, really puts a shining light on why we should be focusing on how to overcome that. One is modular, but also diversity. And that's what Nancy was talking about. So each of us should really be trying to, in our own organizations, trying to figure out, number one, how to do things off-site, like we all said we're doing. But number two, even at the plants or on-site, figuring out how we can tap these untapped labor pools, right?
Yeah, we're hoping, to attract the younger generation through the cool, sexy technology that we have now with robotics and augmented reality and all kinds of, interesting tools that these different factories offer, because the tech world is, definitely something that the younger generation has grown up with. And I do want to point out too, that one of the things that helps with the diversity is not just the 9-to-5 predictability and all of that, but it's also, the fact that you're in a controlled environment, so that training can be offered, more visibility is offered in those environments, and I do believe that if you can get more into more inclusive, you will become more innovative. There's many stats about that, and the more innovative we get, the more productive we get, right?
Absolutely. All right, well, wow, our time is moving right along, and I've got like a whole page of questions left here. So we talked about it a little bit, about the challenges potentially from region to region. What challenges may there be from region to region? Like on the East Coast, the South, and the Southeast, there shouldn't be any challenges with finding precast because we serve those areas, right? But other than that, do you guys find other challenges, different challenges in other regions, different regions around the country?
Yeah, Robbie mentioned the union aspect. So I think not really a challenge, but something that just needs to be coordinated depending on what location you're building at. If there's a PLA, a project labor agreement, as an example, on a project, you really need to make sure that you can incorporate off-site production, off-site manufacturing within the confines of that PLA. Some of the CBAs with each respective union and their affiliates may have things that you'll have certain requirements that you have to meet. So making sure you're getting in there, working with your contractor and subcontractors early to identify those requirements is really going to help go a long way. And I think the other thing too, some municipalities or localities have certain jurisdictional approval requirements for bringing in equipment, materials, prefabricated that were done out of state. And I think of the Pacific Northwest, where we've got quite a few hyperscale projects going on right now, and we have to go through labor and industry, L&I, up there in order to bring in modular electrical rooms. So there's some approval processes that may be distinct from region to region. You just need to make sure that you've got your eyes on that when you're planning the project to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, from a material and installation perspective, it's all bricks and mortar and it all goes together. It's not simple, but it all goes together. The biggest challenge is the jurisdictional requirements and how they vary across locations. It can affect seismic, it can affect sound requirements, it can, there's so many variables there that we have to plan around, and you don't always know what they are until you really start digging into the design and implementation. So, and sometimes they can drive certain material requirements. And that's the biggest challenge that I have on a daily basis, is really working through some of the jurisdictional requirements that can really affect lead time, schedule, and cost.
Yeah, well, I want to point out too that when we talk about these kit parts, you know this better than anyone, Tim. When you go to different geographies, precast, it matters on the distance that you have to, where you fabricate it, how you ship it, and that all relates to the cost. And so to try to figure out a way in which you can be innovative and have multiple suppliers you can service each region and not disrupt your design to the point where it's going to delay putting in for permits and doing due diligence, is also something that we have to focus on. So it's one of the challenges the hurdles we have to kind of get over, is to say, we found the right supply chain across the nation that can not disrupt our design to the point where we can turn around a set and get it in for permit within a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it may be designed for worst case, or if you're working with OFCI vendors and you need to design space requirements and allocation and clearances, but you're still working through that process with your OFCI vendors in terms of selection. Maybe making that standardized design so that you can deploy it and know that that piece of equipment is going to be able to fit.
Yeah. One of the things I found in my travels through the data center industry in the past couple of years is quite often the question that you hear is, what are your lead times? And I've heard it here already, but that's not always necessarily the right question. What you want to ask is, most of the time there's at least 3 data halls, maybe even more within a building. And it's, when can I get that first data hall? When can the trades get into that first data hall? And quite often precast, at least in our area, I'll speak to our area, may not be necessarily the first one that can get to the site, but almost, I'll say almost without fail, we can hand over that first data hall quicker than any other system, basically. Is there other opportunity like electrical, mechanical, that the same type of things are happening, that you choose a system because of a lead time, but maybe it should be a different system because you can get done quicker? I know I've heard the modular, which really sounds like the way to go, so that you can ship them wherever you want, whenever you want, within, I think, Phil, you said, what, 2 days? You can have them anywhere in the country, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think from what you're saying, depending on the region, the skin of the envelope of the building can change. It might be a tilt build, it may be a precast, it may be a steel panel, and whether it's seismic, whether there's hurricane proofing, but the infrastructure, the MEP, we always find is the same, and the data halls that we design are pretty much the same capacity. They may be square or rectangular, but the way we do it, we fit to the site that we purchased and that we're building against. But it's a very coordinated, it's an orchestrated coordination of how you stand up the walls, how you bring in the gens and UPSs and all of the MEP, and fitting out the data halls. But as you say, to allow our customers early access for their trades to come in and do their piece, it takes a lot of coordination and a lot of partnership. But in fact, we're just deploying another 12 meg, commissioning it right now. And that's one of the fastest 12 megs that have been commissioned in the industry. We're working in concert with the client to take possession of that by the end of the day. So these things, they can be done. It's just, it has to be very, very well coordinated.
Well, I wanted to point out to one of the goals that we have that we achieve, I would say 80% of the time, is to be able to deliver, get that speed to market, where you're from pad ready to, giving someone the keys to their data center in 5 to 6 months, right? And we like to do it on a single shift. And we feel like the more you take off site, the more you can deploy, the more you can buffer your schedule with these strategic locations where we put our long lead items, the better it betters our chances of being successful there, which, we've seen lots of success in that area. And I have to tell you, when Crosby called me, or our CEO called me and said he wanted me to come help with build Compass, I said, I don't like how it runs triple shifts and kind of kills the trades. The trades are already at a resource strapped, and it's just not fun to be in that environment. And he said, our goal, we've been very successful with this on many campuses, is to do this on a single shift and still beat the market.
Wow.
Yeah, and Tim, just to add a couple things too, with regard to systems that definitely help speed up the construction process. So we already talked about modular electrical rooms, but there's certainly modular utility systems too. So central chilled water plants, boiler plants, plumbing systems, heat transfer systems, all those things can be manufactured offsite and brought in. I think one of the tricks, and something certainly we advocate as a design builder, is to do that early. Start that planning process with your contractor, your general contractor, and the subs early, because even though they may have lead times through a pre-construction process, you can actually get that ordered and have it ready on site quicker than it would be if you hire your contractor and you've got 100% IFC drawings ready to go.
So the OFCI programs, Nancy, Phil, and Robbie, I imagine you guys are utilizing those, the owner, furnished, contractor installed equipment?
Yep.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Have you seen
So
that grow? Have you seen that grow in the past couple of years where you're taking on more, or is it pretty much standard 5 or 6 items that you do and don't intend on taking on much else?
Yeah, I think you look back, look at the 20-year cycle, right, where the subcontractors originally started procuring the gear 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. I know Turner started, and it slowly went on to the larger GCs. The contractor started procuring a lot of long lead equipment. Really, over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, owners have really started procuring, and we started procuring about 8 years ago. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And number one is you can start the procurement process before you have a contractor on board. Pretty simple, and it helps you get ahead of the game about 3 months. And I believe it saves money. Contractors do a great job procuring gear, but from an owner's perspective, we can negotiate a little harder, and we hold it pretty close to our vest with our operations team.
Bill or Nancy?
Yeah, and as I said, we took this the radical step of pre-procuring 50 meg of that long lead item, so it's held at our manufacturers, so we can just deploy that anywhere we want, and that's given us the ability to deploy. We can deploy from a standing start. Fit out a hall 12 meg in 100 days. And we see that's a requirement now with the growth in our industry. What's what the customers are looking for. All the hyperscalers are desperately keeping ahead of each other. New zones are appearing almost on a monthly basis. So to have the ability to do that is just it's almost table stakes in our industry right now.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want anyone to, don't underestimate the fact that the specialty contractors and the GCs are very good at building things that can be installed with very little issue. So I do put a lot of respect to those guys, especially the MEP trades. And but again, OFCI, the reason we do it is for early procurement, so we can deploy these just like Phil does in our warehouses, not knowing where we might want to use these pieces of equipment. However, I do like the lenses of a builder when we go, because we're, like I said, we're pulling more things off site, and it's extremely valuable to get those perspectives as we go forward.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. The majority of the clients we're working with in the hyperscale side are also warehousing equipment and doing early purchases of OFCI equipment. There is a key coordination piece that you want to make sure happens, that you've got your trade partners and GC involved in, so you're not spending a bunch of money on change orders down the line for scope gaps. But it's certainly it's the way to go. You just need to do it in the right way.
Thanks, guys. I see Adam's back on, and we didn't even get to talk about Edge. Adam, you're early, man.
A lot to talk about here, man. We do have a lot of audience questions, though, so I want to get through some of those. Let's jump over to the first one here. Pretty quick one, I think, and let's do this for the whole team here, Tim, you included. Over the next 5 years, do you guys see the size and square footage of data centers growing or shrinking? We're seeing a lot of edge deployment. There's your edge topic there, right, Tim? We're seeing a lot of edge deployments with these micro data centers. We're seeing still massive data centers from a lot of the hyperscalers and the big developers too. Where do you guys, maybe a round robin, Tim, why don't you start and then call out the next people to answer that?
From what I've been hearing, and even from this panel, I don't see anything slowing down. There are obviously going to be smaller builds coming online as the edge, because what's the edge? My goodness, we could take 30 more minutes just defining the edge. But there's going to be much smaller deployments. There are going to be mid-sized deployments, and they're going to continue to be larger deployments. I don't see anything happening now that would indicate that any sector would slow down. I think we're going to be building more of everything.
Okay. Nancy, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I mean, depending on which statistic you look at, data doubles every year, give or take a few months, right? So, and data is, the world currency. It's how how we transact, it's how we apply, it's how we innovate, it's how we do everything. And being able to organize that data, use that data is super, super important. So that's a huge thing that is not going to diminish in any way. And then there's just the fact that, there is just huge swaths of the population globally who don't have access to the internet, which is a utility that is, just as important as water these days. And COVID has taught us that, very harshly, like the digital divide is a real thing. So you see, these hyperscalers who want to grow on a global scale and solve some of these problems and become, those providers. And when I talk with them all the time, like you all do, and I'll tell you what, money is not keeping them from expanding. What keeps them from expanding is construction. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Ryan, why don't you go? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be specific on the platform. So some providers are better served by big hyperscale projects clustered together. Others may be better served by having smaller projects closer to population centers, just depending on what service they're providing.
Okay, Phil?
Yeah, so it depends on the edge. So I've always defined the edge as the lowest latency point between a service and the consumption of a service. So depending what those two things are would dictate its location and its size. So if it's Netflix, it's probably going to a set-top box, so it's a cable head end. If it's a mail and messaging, it's probably one of the cloud providers. And even they are looking to have those services closer to the municipality. So you're seeing 20, 60 megawatt data centers being built around cities now to service just those cities for the lower latency that they require. It really depends on what that service is. That would dictate who can build it and where it's going to be. But there's just going to be more of everything, of every shape and size, everywhere in the world.
Very cool. Robbie, last but not least.
Yeah, data's not going anywhere. It's all about densification. At least that's what we're seeing. I mean, it varies on the client. I think what you'll continue to see is more of a from a percentage standpoint, a higher increase of clients with more densification. So just you're packing more capacity in a given footprint.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as densities get higher and higher with HPC and other things that require that, are we still going to see these massive data centers with that much more high density availability in there, and they just have more stuff in there, can go any direction. And jump over to next question here from my buddy Rob Nash Bolden. What elements are most difficult to build or fabricate off-site, and because of that, maybe have to be built on-site? What are some of the top ones that you just can't imagine being built off-site right now, or yet? That's for the whole group.
I mean, I would say that number one would be foundations. I mean, we can do duct banks and, we can do huge sections of utilities off-site, obviously, but building foundations, I don't see those being done off-site.
Yeah, and things that you can't scale. So we talked again about just the repeatability of components. The more you have that in the data center, the more efficiency you get when you do it off-site. If you're doing one-off things like foundations, like other things, you're still going to be better suited doing it. Until technologies change, you're better suited doing one-off type things on site.
Okay. Phil?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that you can't build off-site when you have a consistent model, when you have a good plan. Foundation, obviously, that's always going to has to be put in situ. But frankly, there's assembly on site, but if you design it well, I mean, if you get to the point where you've designed it appropriately in like a Revit platform, there's no reason why you can't bend all your pipes off site and bring them in labeled and just assemble them. So that was why I see data centers moving from construction to more production. And that's the way we're going. We have a very defined stamp. Whatever our customer needs, we can deliver that. But I see more and more going offsite and being just-in-time delivery, just to minimize all the trades on the site. I mean, there was a very famous video on YouTube where it showed you could build a whole house in a day. It just took a lot of coordination and a lot of people. So these things can be done. It just takes more coordination and more planning and a lot more just communication, talking, and trust, and working together in very good partnership with your trades, your GCs, and your supply chain.
And not saying this is the way we've always done it, so this is where we're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
Robbie, What do you think?
Exactly. No sacred cows. Yeah.
Rob, you want to jump on the foundation bandwagon?
Yeah, I mean, listen, building a data center is extremely challenging, right? So taking things off site and being able to maximize efficiency with the containers and things like that is a huge benefit. But at the end of the day, the level of expertise that goes into building one of these things, from the MEP subcontractors to the vendors to the general contractor to the commissioning agent and the design firms, there is no way you can do it without these guys. And so at the end of the day, there's still so much work and so much effort that has to go in once that gear hits the site, once the building is up, and that's not going away.
Gotcha. Thanks, guys. All right, next question is a two-parter. Going to try to get through this one here. For the first part, do any of you think we're at the point in the cycle now where costs have become so high that margins are almost near impossible for a REIT or big developers to make projects viable? That's the first part of the question. What do you guys think?
I have not seen that.
Have not seen that? Nope. Well, we're still seeing the demand. I think things are still pushing forward. Robbie, did you have something to say?
Yeah. What you're seeing is the design is changing, right? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where everybody wanted this really bulky structure and all of these sophistication behind the redundancies. You're still seeing a little bit of that, but they're scaled back. And so, the margins are still, I'm not a real estate guy, I'm a construction guy, right? But I mean, we're still running a business on everything, but it's the design requirements at the end of it that the clients are asking for have just scaled back from what they were 10 to 15 years ago.
Gotcha. Thanks a lot. So the second part of this question here was, what does the group think about whether the hyperscale companies could ultimately end up doing or building their own data centers themselves completely, as opposed to going through, a REIT to support it or a developer to support it? And is that trend already happening?
Well, they do build themselves.
I
But
think it's a little bit of everything. They build themselves,
yeah, exactly.
They have support.
And they use people like us to build for them. So as they're moving into a new market or an adjacency, or maybe there's some restrictions in building the building, so it could be for their customers and not for themselves, but they need close proximity. There's a whole slew of builds out there. So yeah, I think that it's going to be both and continues to be both.
Yeah, and I think it's wise of them to kind of divide their portfolio up in that manner, where they can self-perform, and they can also use companies like Align and Compass and T5 as kind of that relief valve when they need it, or that expertise, of that layer of expertise if there's a certain industry sector or geography that they need help in. So, and again, we talked about the volume. There's just such a great amount of volume. There's enough for everybody. So.
Yeah, I agree, and it's really part of their strategic plan too. When we sit down and have pipeline discussions with them, so that we can in turn plan where our teams need to be to support those. There's obviously a big component of developing it themselves, hiring a general contractor and trade contractors to build it, but also leasing.
Thanks. Anyone else before we do one last question? Go for it.
I was going to say, Adam, I think it's, put aside hyperscale, what you're starting to see, what we've seen over the last 5 years or so, is that historically the banking institutions and groups like that who have built their own are starting to lease and leave it to the quote unquote experts to run the asset, operate the asset, as opposed to building themselves.
Gotcha. Thanks. Okay, so this last question we got here is going to go back to that communication talk or note that Phil was mentioning. So have you guys overcome communication gaps that can exist between engineers and specs and the offsite modular manufacturers, such that you can prevent field modifications of the modular delivery after delivery? So doing it right the first time with communication, how do you overcome those hurdles?
I mean, we have a really good version control with our design team, but we also have strategic partners across the nation for both the specialty contractors and the general contractors, where we do source inspections. So we do have differences obviously between our equipment based on end client needs, and if we're going to deploy to a certain site, we do source inspections and we go look at those ahead of time, so that we're certain by the time it hits the job site we're ready for it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and we've not really had that because we've designed it specifically so that we have that modularity. So let's just say we deploy in a 6 meg block. We can do that all day long at any site. But if there's a hyperscaler who wants a catcher system, same equipment, we just change the automatic transfer switches so we can deploy that. So we spend a lot of time designing this for every eventuality to maximize our ability to deliver on time and in any market.
Just from the builder's perspective, so the communication is really the lifeblood of a successful project. You think about the factory witness testing that the team will go down, subcontractor, the general contractor, the owner, the vendors, obviously. There'll be a lot of notes that will take place during those factory witness testing. Making sure that those items get incorporated before that equipment hits the site is key. The other thing that we found that helps make projects successful, going back to the OFCI discussion, and because owners are typically procuring all that equipment themselves, they've written purchase orders that are really well vetted at this point, but sharing those purchase orders with the general contractor and the trades, that we can vet them as well and help identify scope gaps before they occur in the field, just saves a ton of time, so you don't have to go back and do rework, and a ton of just resources with planning.
Thanks. That's a good point. Robbie, did everything?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the client. Some clients want something in 4 months, and you've got to install what you've got in inventory, and some clients want complete customization, and there's a lot of collaboration in order to deliver the solution. So, I mean, I'm a big believer in collaboration and providing exactly what the client wants, but sometimes they just care about speed.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, speed to market's more of a push now than ever, I guess. Tim, do you want to jump on that before we close this thing up?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
All right, thanks a lot. Well, once again, another solid discussion, and I'd like to thank today's distinguished speakers and our attendees for viewing at home, and of course our sponsors, our lead sponsors, Tyndall Corporation and Tim, and Clayco as well. Thanks, Ryan, for joining us. We hope you'll all join us for our next webinar, next Tuesday, September 1st at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, as we shift our focus over to the operations stack, exploring remote monitoring, efficiency management, and strategies in power regulation. We'll see you all soon, and thanks again for tuning in.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.